In this video, I'm going to show you how I can pull in stock prices for a ticker and also calculate its Williams R values to determine if it's oversold or if it's overbought. Now, before we jump in, if you're finding these tutorials and tips helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and make sure to enable notifications so you never miss another video. So first up, let's get started and specify the stock we want to pull in. So I'm going to pull in DJT stocks. That's been a popular one of late. And I'm going to use the Google Finance function so I can reference that ticker, and I can change it if I wanted to. Pull in the price, and I'm going to go back, let's say 90 days from today up until today. So give me the historical values. Make sure I've parsed that correctly here. So we're missing a comma there. There we go. So now we've got the date and we've got the closing values. Now for the Williams R calculation, I also need the highs and the lows, which I can also pull through the Google Finance function. And I'm going to show you how we can do that. So if I use the Google Finance function, I can specify exactly which attribute I want. So if I just want the high for the day, I can specify high. And again, I can set up the same sort of metrics. Today minus 90 days up until today. And then if I close that out, it's going to give me the same values. Now, I have two options here. One, I could hide these date values, which are showing again. What I could also do is use the index function to say, I just want the second column. So I'm going to skip the row argument. I'm just going to say I want column 2. I'm going to do that. So you could do it this way. The one thing to be careful of, however, is make sure that you're referencing the same number of days. Like here I'm going back 90 days. Here I'm also going back 90 days. So the danger is if I change this to a different value and I no longer have that date field to sort of double check that I'm checking July 31st against July 31st, then there's a potential your data is not lining up and now you're not comparing the same days. So if you think you might do that, what you may want to do is leave that date column in there, and then you could just hide it if you wanted to, just for the sake of double checking and making sure you're comparing the same dates at a later time. But if you're comfortable in setting it up this way, then you can also do this as well. And you can even specify, we can create a section for the number of days. So for example, let's say we want to set it to 90 days. What we could do is set that to a variable. So that way we avoid that risk of making that change. I just wanted to show you the option of hiding that. So if we change this to 60 days, everything's going to update, but I'm going to set it back to 90. So by putting in a variable, we can get around that. But you can still include both if you want to see the date by just getting rid of that index function I've used here. So to get the low, I'm going to change the value from high to a low. And we've got the closing values, the highs, and the lows for the stock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this value in yellow because I like to put any inputs in a yellow background just so it's clear that these are variables, these are values that you can change, because you may not want to make any changes not knowing if it's going to affect your spreadsheet or mess up your calculations. Now for the Williams R calculation, we need the highest high and the lowest low. And typically we're going to be looking at the past 14 periods. And so if my header is on row 3, 3 plus 14 puts me at 17. So I'm going to use the max function to get the highest value here. And I'm going to use the min function to get the lowest low during that stretch. And I'm not going to freeze these formulas. And so that way they're always going to adjust. It's always going to be the past 14 periods. And now that I've got that, I can go ahead and calculate that Williams R value. So to calculate that, we're taking the difference between the highest high and the closing value, and then dividing that by the difference between the highest high and the lowest low, and multiplying that by a factor of minus 100. So now I've got my values. So I'm going to autofill that down. And I'm just going to clean up this formatting a little bit, just so we don't see too many numbers. So with DJT, this has been a fairly volatile stock. So it's not surprising that it has some extreme values here, close to 100 and close to 0 as well. So what I'm going to do is set up a rule, set up conditional formatting to help highlight when it's oversold and it's overbought. So when it's overbought, the Williams R values are above minus 20, so between minus 20 and 0. When they're oversold, they're between minus 80 and minus 100. So let's create rules for that. So I'm going to click Format, and actually I'm going to select this entire range, go to Format, Conditional Formatting, and I'm going to set it to a custom formula. And what I'm going to check for is the value in column G. So I'm going to say, okay, value G1 is greater than minus 20. And so in this case, it's considered to be overbought. Now, the one thing that I'm going to want to fix with this is, because it's going to pick up 0 values, I want to apply and add an AND function to this to say, and the value in G1 is also a number. So I'm going to use isNumber G1 and then close that out. And now this will only highlight values that are greater than minus 20. So I've got these ones over here. So we can see that these are overbought because we can see the closing values here are near the highest highs. So if we look at, and actually let's freeze these values here. Freeze up to 4. Adjust that, there we go. So now we've frozen those values, and we can see that the closing value in here, 47.36, is close to that highest high. So the difference is fairly small. So we can see that it's near those highs, and so it's overbought. So now I'm going to create another rule showing me when it's oversold, when it's between a value of minus 80 and 100. So I'm going to create another rule here and apply to this entire range. So I'm going to select A through G. And again, let's set up a custom formula. And in this case, I'm going to just say the value in G1. And the reason I'm selecting G1 here is because since I'm selecting this entire range, I need to start at row 1. If I start at row 2, row 3, or wherever else, then the conditional formatting is going to offset. Say, okay, even though I started from row 1, I'm not selecting row 1. So it's going to automatically assume I want to offset by that many rows. That's why it's important to set exactly from the cell that I'm first selecting. In this case, since I'm selecting everything, it's going to be row 1. And I'm freezing column G because I only want to be evaluating column G, regardless of if the cell is in A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. It's always going to be looking at G. So in this case, I'm going to look at if the value in G is less than minus 80. Now in this case, it's not going to be highlighting 0 values because we're looking at minus 80. So I don't have to add that statement or that AND function to check that it's a number. But what I will do is change the formatting style so that it's red and the font is white. So it's easier to distinguish between an oversold value and an overbought value. So we can see now easily that here the closing value is $22. That was near the low, and that was also near the lowest low. So we can see that it is deeply oversold if it's near the lows. If we go over here, we see 16.5. That was near the highest high, or at least reasonably close. Here, 22 and 21.8. So a lot closer, and hence that Williams R value is a lot smaller, indicating that it's potentially overbought. So by setting this up, it's really easy to track these Williams R values and to spot potential buying opportunities for a stock that you're following. So the key thing to remember is all you want to do is use that Google Finance function to pull in the price, and it can also be used to pull in the high and the low. And then all you're doing is looking at the highest high for the past 14 trading periods, or however far you want to go back, the lowest lows. And then that Williams R is looking at the difference between the highest high and the close, and comparing that to the difference between the highest high and the lowest low, multiplying it by a factor of -100. And from there, conditional formatting does the rest for us to help us identify overbought or oversold values. And obviously you can change these variables based on how many days you want to look back and the stock that you want to track. So you can change this to another one, let's say NVIDIA, and we can easily see the same sort of patterns and indicators set up here. So it's really easy with Google Sheets to flip back and forth between tickers and to do these calculations on the fly. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.